Hey, I'm Veronica from UXPressia. Let me briefly introduce you to what we at UXPressia do. UXPressia is an online platform where you can build customer journey maps, impact maps, and personas for your organization. With more than 100 ready-to-use templates, you can speed up your persona creation and mapping processes. To help you build confidence on your journey and learn from other practitioners, we host community events on user, customer, employee experience, and all things journey mapping. Our speakers are industry experts that are willing to share their knowledge to help you design and build better products and services. We also speak at the events ourselves and share tips and tricks we learned through years of practice and numerous interviews with other mappers. On top of that, we have UXPressia Academy, where you can dive into learning how to build journey maps, personas, and conduct interviews. And do that all at your own pace. Don't forget to check it out and enjoy the event.
Okay, so thank you everyone for attending. Before I want to cover the key questions that we're going to go through during this talk. So one being, what solutions can we use to improve the employee experience? Two, how can we come up with possible solutions to problems brought up? Three, how do we decide what solutions to put in place? Which ones should we start with? Four, how can we measure the success of the employee journey map? How can we measure the success of implemented solutions? And five, what KPIs should we use? So as Veronica showed earlier, a very large journey map. When I do work for clients, what she showed before is more typically what mine would look like going through the process. Although I usually make an individual one for each persona as opposed to kind of combine those all. So for the purpose of this presentation and this talk, I want to keep things simple and focus on 5 main areas. And these are common pain points I find across clients I've worked with. So I usually also include quotes of what people said during the interview process. I'm not including it here just because that's more confidentiality parts of it, which I can't really exactly share. But main problems pain points I come across with most clients is something to do around maybe that the day one, maybe people are overwhelmed. During the training process, they're not really sure beyond their manager what they should be doing or how they get along with other people. Recognition can be a huge problem. Kind of having consistent meetings with their manager is a typical issue. And performance review. It seems like everyone I talk with always dreads the performance review, and for good reason. So those are the 5 main pain points for the purpose of this talk that we're going to be looking at. So again, to zoom in a bit and talk more about the pain points. So, day one onboarding, there's too much documentation to go through. People are constantly needing to figure out what acronyms are. I'm sure we've all been in situations where, someone will say 3 or 4 acronyms in one sentence, and you have no idea what they're saying, especially when you're beginning. When it comes to more in the training, beyond their manager, they're not really sure what to do about things and where to go to for other things within the organization. So, for example, the unwritten rules is a big thing I like to talk about. When it comes to recognition, a lot of teams struggle to get recognized beyond their own team. A lot of it tends to be inward and not outward within the organization. Again, with the manager relationships, one-on-one meetings are more on an ad hoc basis instead of being structured on the regular. I know some people who will go weeks or months before they get any one-on-one time with their manager to know how things are going. And of course, the performance review. A lot of organizations, it's very much a kind of get this out of the way mentality. That it seems like people will do everything they can, but they don't really know how to get like a better ranking, which may lead to some incentives like a raise. So those are some of those key areas. So back to the key questions. One thing to first discuss is, what solutions can we use to improve the employee experience? So I know in this talk where at this point we've already done the interviews. You've identified your personas, You've had X amount of interviews, you've collected the pain points, you've collected their experiences. So obviously, what kind of things came up during the interview? What did they mention? There's a great question I love that you could use in interviews to get more insight into this. And that's what I call the magic wand question, which is, if you had a magic wand to change anything in your role, what would you change? This is a very open-ended question that can give you great insights. And from there, it can help you derive solutions directly from employees of what they should see done. But there's one element about that I want you to be aware of. So there's the author Neil Gaiman has this great quote. Before what I do now, I used to be more user design experience. I was a product manager, and this is something that someone who is higher up than me brought up, and I really love this quote of, remember, when people tell you something's wrong or doesn't work for them, they're almost always right. When they tell you exactly what they think is wrong and how to fix it, they're almost always wrong. So what do I mean by that? When you have these interviews, you're not going to the people you're interviewing, your personas, your employees, to give you all the fixes. That's your job. It's up to you to uncover the pain points during the interview. You're not saying, hey, give us all the solutions we should implement to fix everything. What you want to figure out is, why is there pain points around recognition? What are the issues they have around their current manager structure? What kind of issues do they have with the performance review? So that's what I mean by that. When it comes to the interview process with employees, by all means, if they bring up potential solutions, that's great. But your key area should be focusing on the pain points. So at this point, let's move on to the next question, the key question here of, how can we come up with possible solutions to problems brought up? So again, to reiterate what the kind of the main pain points I've identified for this talk, too much documentation on day one, training, like they don't really know what to do beyond their manager of who they should talk to about things. There's a lack of recognition. Meetings with managers are on an ad hoc basis, and performance reviews are very generic and kind of a let's get this over with kind of mentality. So there's this great quote from the late songwriter Leonard Cohen, that if I knew where the good songs came from, I go there more often. So when people ask me about, oh, how do I come up with ideas for solutions? It's like, well, it's not an easy process, and it's never easy despite like what kind of level of your skill level's at. So let's start with some ways you could do that. As I mentioned, if you use that magic wand question during your interviews with your personas, you'll come up with some possible solutions. And again, I want to reiterate that during these interviews, focus more on the pain points. If solutions come up, great, but that's not the main focus of these interviews. Another great way is to look within other areas within your organization. So what works well for one department in one area might not in another, and find those differences. So I've worked with several clients where I've done multiple personas where, this department here was really great with their managers, getting the consistent one-on-ones with managers, getting great feedback. While there was another department where that wasn't the case. It was very all over the place. It was very disorganized. So the easy solution for me was to, hey, why don't you go talk to this department over here, find out what works for them, why they're able to keep this consistency, and let's bring it from there into this department. So that's one depending on the size of your organization, it could be very much a case of where that can happen. And of course, when you collect all your information for your journey map, is conducting brainstorming sessions to come up with ideas. And then of course, run those ideas by those you've interviewed for feedback. So when it comes to these brainstorming sessions, it's just like this picture I have here. It's just even just throwing down basic solutions on a sticky note or whatever, and just getting down as many as possible, and not trying to get married and never get married to one solution to a problem. So studies show that companies that come up with multiple solutions do better. So when you have more solutions, you have more of that flexibility. And even have it coming up with that list of solutions is great. I'm not saying you have to implement all these solutions, but to have those on hand and get that feedback will do wonders for you instead of focusing on, okay, here's our one possible solution for this problem. Now, for the sake of this presentation, I am simplifying it a bit and focusing mostly on one solution per those major pain points I went over. And another one is what I like to call, or the internet calls, your Google Fu. So like Kung Fu, which is just do simple searches. For example, this one on the left here about is right from ChatGPT, right? Of how I just inputted, how can we improve the performance review? And it kind of gives this, spits out this whole list. Or of course, you could even just do a simple Google search and find great ways to improve it. I guess on that note, Veronica, I was there in a couple of weeks, someone's doing a talk about AI with journey mapping, I believe, which would be something very interesting to look into if you're more interested in kind of finding ways of integrating AI into journey mapping. It's something I've only done very basic research into, and mostly it's just kind of GPT stuff. So I think that's a couple weeks from now. It should be an interesting talk. If you do your Google searches, you might find something like this of how Adobe, revamped their performance review. And this is a great article I found about how Adobe went from breaking down the yearly performance review to something more. I think they did kind of 2 or 3 times a year, and it was greatly beneficial for them. And of course, use your community. Like if you're part of any Slack groups, your local network, whatever, you could always just ask people, hey, we're struggling with our current performance review. Does anyone have any good insight of what we could do? So there's many, many ways you could identify those solutions from looking to your community. And of course, your past experiences as well. If you found that a previous organization you worked at, had a really good day one onboarding experience, what kind of things did they do? Or if they had a solid performance review system, what kind of things did they do differently than what you're doing now? So you come up with all these solutions. What do you do from then? How do you decide which solutions to put into place and which ones should you start with? So the main thing is, of course, gather your list of solutions, and you want to rank them by impact and ease of implementation. And as well, depending on what you're doing, you do want to consider financial viability. If it's something that's you're creating from the ground up, and depending on your budget, it might not be, might not be viable at the moment. So going again over those 5 pain points, again, simplifying just for the sake of this presentation. Usually I have a lot more solutions for each, but if we're talking day one onboard, I'm going to say, let's make a acronym spreadsheet for people so they understand what people are saying in some sentences as a result. Another one for training would be creating a buddy system, creating a formal recognition program, creating a scheduled one-on-ones with managers, and turning annual reviews into semi-annual reviews. So here's 5, again, just for the sake of keeping things simple for this talk, 5 solutions for these 5 areas. So the buddy system, performance review revamp, creating a recognition program, recurring scheduled one-on-ones with direct managers, and providing a list of acronyms. So there's many ways you could determine your ranking. The one I prefer most is called pairwise comparison. So it's usually it can be pretty easy when you have like this is a pretty easy list to rank. But if you have, you end up with a list of 14, 15 possible solutions, and you're having a hard time ranking, using a pairwise comparison, I find, to me, is my preferred way of how things rank. So I'll provide a links afterwards, and it's something even if you just Google as well, you could find. What you do is you enter in your options. So here I've entered in the 5 options that we've discussed. And what a pairwise comparison will do is it gives you 2 of the solutions, and then it asks you like which one is the greater impact. So some of them will be pretty easy. Like if you create monthly one-on-ones with direct managers, having that scheduled versus providing an acronym list, obviously the greater impact is going to be monthly one-on-ones. But then you might have some that are a little more difficult to rank, where it's, creating monthly one-on-ones with direct manager versus revamp the performance review. Those are both much more, have greater impact, but they're much closer. I still give the edge to, for example, to create monthly one-on-ones with direct managers. So basically, I think for this one, yeah, it goes through like 10 different ones. So it'll rank like buddy system against this, it'll rank this against that. And at the end, it'll spit out something for you that shows, okay, this is what you came up with. And I find this is the best way to rank solutions, because it's if people ask you like, oh, what's your favorite 10 films? And you're like, oh, it's very tough to do. But having something like this of punching in all those solutions you have, it makes it very easy to rank it. So for the sake of when I went through this myself, of having the greatest impact, I had the buddy system, creating monthly one-on-ones with direct manager, create a recognition program, revamp the performance review, and then provide an acronym list. And I just have a link at the bottom of the site where I used to just quickly make a pairwise comparison between the 2. But again, it's something with a quick Google search that you could find. And this is something, if it's very difficult to rank, you find this is a good way of doing so. So if we're going to, and I did do one for ease of implementation. That's something you could also do as well. If you want to say, hey, if I want to compare the ease of implementing the solution, that's something you could do. So coming up with it, this is what it looks like. So you have more on the lower impact, but ease of implementation, you have something like the acronym sheet. Whereas something that's more difficult, but impact a solution, would be more the buddy system. So even with that list, you may want to start, and I always recommend start with solutions that are lower impact, but are easier to implement. And the reason is it gets that kind of momentum going to get those, what I call those quick wins. So even though, say, implementing a buddy system is going to be much more impactful than say an acronym sheet you can provide to new employees, it's, doing the acronym sheet is going to take much less time, and it's something you could implement pretty much quicker than, say, creating a buddy system from the ground up, or creating a recognition program, or structuring manager one-on-ones. So that's going to vary, but I always kind of recommend to people, it's like kind of getting the ball rolling is find a solution you've come up with that's maybe doesn't have a huge impact, but something that's pretty easy to implement to get things moving. Veronica, do we have any questions in chat here? I've seen a few chat messages pop up. Is there anything that I should address now or wait till the end?
I believe we can answer one question here.
Sure.
I suppose you already mentioned it, but I just want to make sure. So Alex was asking, when you showed the first map, at the very beginning of the talk, when you showed the map, Alex asked if there are any reason why touch points are not included in this example here, right?
Why I didn't include touch points? I think it's just more for simplicity's sake. And it depends. Sometimes what I usually for my journey maps is we'll have goals and expectations. So yeah, these are, I guess I should mention, they are a little different than, say, some I guess the templates. And I usually typically have about these 4 or 5 rows here. Like there's the employee goals and expectations, there's the employee experiences, and some points touch points might be in there as well. I'll have the emotions. I usually have a quote section, which will be kind of more the moments that matter. Then the pain points. and then opportunities for improvement. So I think it's more just for the sake of this presentation. I am just kind of keeping it more simple. So that's why I didn't include the touch points as much.
Thank you. I believe we can move on.
Yeah. So we went through the pairwise. Then kind of deciding of the other key questions, how can we measure the success of the employee journey map, and how can we measure the success of implemented solutions? So this is now where we get more into that of seeing how things work and also more into the KPIs. So when I typically work with clients, a lot of cases are, once I do the journey map, that's more, I don't say that's more or less where my work ends. But it's more, I give them that information. I kind of provide a summary finding for them to provide to employees, and that's where they kind of go from there. But I do share the journey map for them to work on. And if they do want to bring me back in, that's great as well. But once you go through all these findings, it's usually with the people you interviewed. Yes, you could give them the journey map if they want to look at it, but usually kind of giving them a one pager of like, here's our key findings and here's what we're going to do. And then, it's not going to be a change overnight. It might be something that takes a quarter or two, maybe a fiscal year, depending on the size of your organization, of implementing a buddy system or revamping the performance review. Then you could kind of set up more talks with these individuals that you've had earlier when you were doing the interview for the journey map to see how well you've covered these pain points. And even conducting another set of interviews to update your journey map. So one thing you might find happening, or if things went well, is you'll find problems that were mentioned during your interviews, these pain points are disappearing. Although as a result, new ones may arise. So what I mean by that is, so for example, here, let's say you went through with, you added in the acronym sheet, you implemented a buddy system, you implemented a recognition program, more scheduled one-on-ones with managers, multiple revamping performance reviews so they happen more often during the year. You might find, so for example, this part of the journey map here I just created was, here's the employee experiences, how they felt before, and here's how they were after the solutions were implemented. So for example, with day one onboarding, kind of maybe felt like they're being taken for granted. They didn't really feel like they made the right choice to join the organization. But now their employee experience is much better with it. They have a much better idea of what to expect before day one. If they have the buddy system implemented, someone to help them out with the unwritten rules of the organization and helps them see the organization at a much higher level to get a better understanding of how everything works there. So what do I mean by additional pain points might be arising? Well, for example, if you went from before where there was no buddy system and now for training you do have a buddy system, there might be pain points there. For example, a common problem I come across with organizations when it comes to creating buddy systems are, how do we find current employees to be buddies? That's always something companies struggle with. Or very rarely, but this does happen, where some companies do so much, provide so much documentation for the pre-boarding process before day one, that for a lot of people that feels like they're doing homework or free work. Or if it's, performance reviews or scheduling more one-on-one interviews with managers on the regular, it could be difficult for managers to keep to that schedule. So there's always something's going to be changing with the process. So again, with, employee journey map, thinking that like, a local map or Google Maps zoomed in and not a world map. If you, go to your local map on Google Maps, new buildings are being built, new businesses are coming in, new businesses are closing. So whenever you do your journey map, it's never quite the one and done element of it. You always want to be, your organization's always going to be changing. So you want your journey map to reflect that. So And another thing to kind of get that last key question here is what kind of KPIs should you use? You know, and the what I call the cheap answer, I guess, would be it depends. Um, so for this process, I recommend to break down your KPIs between the overall implementation, how it impacts the overall employee experience, and those related to your specific solutions. So, for example, for KPIs for overall implementation, this can be employee satisfaction, employee retention, time to productivity, employee net promoter score, employee engagement score, average tenure. You could see how these change over the course of time. If you want to get more specific, and then you want to get more specific for your solution. So, for example, things around performance review KPIs, you know, the satisfaction with the performance review, the completion rate, the goal achievement rate, the manager feedback score. If you're doing a buddy system, KPIs could be the buddy acceptance rate, time to competency / productivity, new hire satisfaction, the buddy commitment rate, how often they're meeting, you know, recognition program KPIs, the frequency rate of recognition, the participation rate, employee motivation impact, team recognition rate. For manager one-on-one KPIs, you know, the attendance rate, feedback incorporation, manager feedback score, goal achievement rate. And of course, again, using Google Foo skills can be very helpful as well. For example, I did as well. I don't show the screenshot here, but for a lot of these KPIs, I asked ChatGPT, like what are good KPIs for the buddy system? Because I already have like a list of them, but then it spits out about a good 14, 15 of them in an instant, which is very helpful. So when it comes to KPIs, you know, there's always so many resources that you can make use of. And that said, whenever I talk about KPIs, I always have mixed feelings about them. Maybe it's easier for me being an outsider from an organization instead of working within, where there's this great quote from who was a sociologist named William Bruce Cameron, not Albert Einstein, even though it's widely, like many quotes, it's widely attributed to Einstein when it's not, that not everything that can be counted counts, and not everything that counts can be counted. So what I mean for that is, you know, measuring the success of these solutions you've implemented, great, you know, but you want to be careful you don't go too far into the details and KPIs that you end up not seeing the forest for the trees. For example, there could be a lot of those potential pesky vanity metrics, which seems like something that it's good to have a handle on or know about, when in all reality, it's more of a distraction. So when it comes to KPIs, it's like in life in general, like your grandparents would say, all in moderation. Don't lose insight to how these changes impact the overall employee experience. So that kind of covers the main areas of the talk. So whenever I do these things, when these talks, I always kind of ask at the end. So with everything we've gone through here of you know, coming up with solutions, how to rank solutions, how to measure the success of them, with everything I talked about today, like what's one small step you could take moving forward? You just want to type in the chat.
Okay, I believe someone is typing.
Yeah, give them time. Yeah.
Let's give some time.
I love to start collecting people's ideal future states. Yeah, perfect. I love that. And that's where that magic wand question works really well. And that. And there you go. There's the acronym list. Actually, I'm trying to think LDJ now. What? So there we go. We have, oh, Lightning Decision Jam. Lighting Decision Jam. I've actually never heard of that. I'm very curious.
I was
We do
just
quarterly
thinking that I
surveys.
need some more explanation in here still.
Yeah. And we plan to really lock the touch points. So first, getting together a form will be my first step. Yeah. Narrow down the problems to solve. Okay, interesting. Yeah. So yes, that's the, I know we kind of have the Q&A here. Veronica, should I just leave the slide here, or is there anything else you want to present on your end? But I guess this is the best way to reach me. My email, and we'll stick around, and yeah, there we go. Yeah, best. And when you do, if you connect with me on LinkedIn, just mention this event, so I know it's like, oh, that's where you're coming from. That's the best way to do it.
Well, you can leave the slide if you want. If you don't want, you can remove it just as you wish. I have nothing to show for now.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, there was, I know you're mentioning questions that came up earlier that we should probably address.
Absolutely. We will take a little pause between the questions. So once again, if you have any questions to Paul, make sure to drop them in the chat. We will get back to them just in a minute, probably. And meanwhile, I still want to remind you and mention it to those who joined us later, and there were plenty of those people, that our UXPressia team offers to help you find the weak spots in your journey mapping process and see how they can be improved. All you need to do is book a call with UXPressia team. You can see the link in the chat. You can use it and actually find out something new here. And if you already build maps and it stops you from transitioning to UXPressia, well, here's the bonus to you. Our team will help you transfer your maps into UXPressia quick and smooth. And with that, we can move on to the questions that people have already dropped in the chat. So there was a question from Jason when you were talking about the simplified map that you were showing. Just a little bit of context for you in case it helps. So the question was, how do you manage different interpretations of the journey map when it comes to executing on it?
Actually, I'm going to go back to that all the way back. So I'll just have this up. Might be a bit hard to read, but can you repeat the question?
Yes, sure. How do you manage different interpretations of the journey map when it comes to executing on it?
Different interpretations how to execute on it? Yeah, well, that's a really good question.
Well, maybe Jason will give us more context in the chat.
No, I get what he's getting at there too. That's a really good question. Typically, I mean, the way I work is it's usually I'm fairly independent, or if I do, I work with one other person to put the map together. So it's usually we're kind of on the same page. So it's for the way my work. Usually, like I said, my companies might just kind of leave me to do my thing for a bit. So the interpretations more or less ends up being the same. But if you're, I guess, working internally and you have several people working on it, that's where things might get a little more difficult. That's where it's always ideal to have recordings of the conversations and to be very thorough. As I mentioned, this is a very simplified journey map. Yeah. Oh yeah. Different people are going to have different perspectives. And I think a lot of it is sometimes someone will see a problem that's much larger than it is compared to other people. And this depends on how many interviews you might do, where one person, it might be like this huge hassle for them, when in all reality, they might be a bit of a outlier case. I'm just seeing what chat says. Yeah, that's kind of I hate to say like it depends, but the more thorough you are with your discovering the pain points, and again, that's like I've done a presentation before, I think with you guys with UXPressia that kind of gets more into that, of really diving in, and that's kind of the main thing is the further you dive into the pain points, the more clear it should be to everyone. And I find also that pairwise comparison thing works really well with groups if you're kind of having a hard time deciding which one's best, of what solutions are to rank. And yeah, so like Alex says, loving the idea of the one pager. Yeah, because as I mentioned, this is a simple journey map. As Veronica showed at the beginning, that might be more like what my journey map can look like for a persona. So for me, who spent hours working on a journey map, like I love it. So but for someone who I've interviewed for an hour a few weeks ago or a few months ago, depending on the time frame, they might have forgot by the interview at that point, like, oh, maybe I wonder what's going to come of that. So to provide something like a one pager for them to say, here's our key findings from this, and here's what we're going to do. Just something that doesn't cause their eyes to gloss over. Because if you went just and showed them that, obviously it shows you put the work into it to do that journey map, but you want to just give them something that's simple and they could just quickly look at and be like, okay, my voice has been heard. I think that answered other questions too. I hope that answered the initial question as well.
Oh, I believe so. And you actually, I don't know, we're involved into some more conversation here in the chat. Okay, so we have another question actually from Jason as well. How do you avoid survey fatigue? Because a lot of this require a lot of survey and active participation from the same people multiple times.
Yeah, that's a good question. I've found in my experiences, when I usually have one interview with when I say we have the persona, we have X amount of people that we interview. I haven't found issues with survey fatigue because I know we do these, give or take, these 1 hour interviews. We get very thorough about everything, and that's about it. And I guess it's more that I guess that's also kind of the challenges with these kind of questions I'm getting, is because usually as a consultant, it's like, okay, here I come in, I do this depending on our work agreement. I provide them the journey map. Here's their findings, and that's kind of on them to get the rest. So that's where I mentioned earlier that it's going to take a bit of time to see results. Like once you do your journey map, it's not like 1 week later you're going to be surveying your the people you interviewed, like, oh, how's everything going? Now what do you think? It's like you want to give it some time. Maybe it's a fiscal quarter. Maybe it's a couple of them. Maybe it's the fiscal year end. It might be several months before you reach out to them again. There's always that challenge, right? You want to find the balance of you don't want to do these journey maps. You do the interviews and then they're like, oh, cool. That's something I'll never hear from again. But also you want to give them some breathing room. So it's not like, again, you're doing survey fatigue. So it's best to do the journey map, record those findings in that one, that one pager, and then let them know it's like, we're going to reach out to you again in X amount of time. But again, as I mentioned earlier, if you're during the process of coming up with solutions, that could even be like just a quick email. If you're in the office, you could just go over to them, or even just a quick Slack message saying like, hey, what do you think of these solutions? And that could also be something that's an ongoing process.
I like that kind of small step idea.
Mm-hmm.
Like you don't need to do something huge. You can do something little that will be effective as well, probably.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we have a question from Alex. How much time do you consider ideal to run a CJM session? EJM, probably in your case.
Yeah. There's another answer of it depends. But I guess so for my process, if I do like a persona, this is something I've talked about in one of your previous talks, is I aim for about 5 interviews within the persona. And there's this whole concept. I think someone mentioned, yeah, the training of Nielsen Norman Group did some journey mapping training. There's an article or the research they did where when you're finding pain points or getting feedback, typically 5 users, or in this case, employees, are all you typically need to get the vast majority of the pain points. Where afterwards, if you ask 10, 15, 20, 25 people, you're pretty much getting the same information. So per persona, I typically do 7 to 8 interviews, interviews with individuals, about 1 hour each. And again, like I said, the timing that was over a course of several weeks, just to kind of schedule around people's timing to get that interview done, and for me with my schedule to get that done. And then it's just kind of poking away at the journey map. So I don't really have I haven't really been like, oh, I spent, X amount of hours on it, but it's something that, for me as coming in from as a consultant, is a bit more tricky to kind of get those interviews lined up. That's always the biggest thing is getting that. And that's something that could take place over the course of a few weeks. And hopefully that answers your question. So it's not, because that's the main thing, right? Is you get those interviews, and then what I would do is right after the interview, I take notes during the interviews. Like I just put in a bunch of this is a complete journey map, but I use something like Miro, where it's just kind of throwing sticky notes down of like, here's the key points that came up from this talk. And then we iterate through it until we get something that's more finalized, until we get to the finalized. So my process is like, it typically, once I have all the information, usually like within a week, or I've done all the interviews, usually within the week, I could have something ready that's finalized. But again, it kind of depends on when you could conduct those interviews and collect all that information.
Thank you, Paul. And you mentioned that you mostly put the map up together all alone. Do you run any CJM session? EJM, sorry. I'm just looking at the question in the chat. Do you actually run any like EJM sessions with your clients?
Like how to produce one? Yeah, yeah.
Probably, or something of that kind. Maybe you are building the map together with them.
I think it's more when I do work with clients, a lot of it comes down to to the interview process. That's my big thing. Usually, and like I said, I think of what I've done 2 or 3 talks with UXPressia about more of like the interview process itself. But usually that's something I do with clients more at the end is, if I provide them the journey map, but also it's like, here's my interview process. Of course, you could bring me in if you want further expertise, but here's my process of collecting all that information.
Okay, got it. Then we have a question from Sophie. That's a long question. You could probably see that in the chat, just in case it is convenient for you to read it as well. So do you have an alternative method that you have used other than the pairwise comparison that can consider different business implications and stakeholder perspectives when mapping or prioritizing potential solutions?
So far, I have not. I also say Yulia has provided, said, have you tried impact mapping? But I've found so far in my experiences, pairwise comparison has done the trick. So, but at that's something that I haven't, I'd say, looked into at this point.
Do we have any comment from Sophie here? Probably. No.
I also see, kind of coming back to that point I was mentioning about the 5 interviews. I know Marina said around 7 interviews with each profile/persona, and yeah, that's typically what I find is 7's a good number. I usually find more of the later interviews, it's more about I don't want to say clarifying, but it's more it's more kind of asserting like, okay, these XYZ, these problems that came up, I might bring up more directly in those interviews just to make sure we're all on the same page. But yeah, typically by like 7 interviews or so, it's like, okay, we have all the information. These last 2 or 3 interviews I do might just be to further clarify or just to make sure it's like, okay, this is how everyone feels.
Make sure you're on the same page.
Yeah.
Another question is from Alex. That's a long question as well.
Yeah.
I tend to include mainly pain points and things to fix in journeys versus what's working given the goal of a journey map. This, however, is tricky given sensitivities. Do you ever include good moments, good experiences in your journeys?
Yes, 100%. And I guess like if I were to show like a full journey map of like what Veronica, what you showed at the beginning, there's a lot of sections that the ones I did for this presentation, like these are common pain points where a lot of things arise. But I sometimes might have sections where if it's like work-life balance, for example, and then everything in it's all great experiences. I didn't include it for the sake of confidentiality, but as I mentioned, I have like a moments that matter or like a quote section. So for some areas, yeah, there might be a mixture of good quotes and bad quotes where, maybe if they're mixed on their managers, it's like one person might say, yeah, great experience with my manager, best manager I've ever had. And someone else might be like, I can never seem to get a hold of my manager. So yes, in a full-fledged journey map, yes, I do include the good moments and good experiences. And that's one of the key things when I, work with clients is more of that summary. It's like, here's the areas that are working really well. Here's kind of more the neutral areas, and then here's kind of more the areas you want to work on.
Okay, thank you. I was actually thinking that it's probably worth including the good stuff into the map, because it's not only to fix something, but also to see what are the strong suits of the company.
And as I mentioned, if I worked on various personas, like one persona might be really good with like their relationship with their team or the relationship with their direct manager when another persona is not. And that's where I mentioned is a great way to find solutions is, hey, what's this area of the company doing where this works so well? Why isn't it working here?
Oh, wow. I just understood this idea once again in a different way. Wow, I like it. Thank you, Paul. And we have 5 minutes left, and we have 2 questions in here. So one question is from Louis. Does the number of personas found during the research and interview process determine the number of journey maps created? For instance, if we identify 3 personas, would we need to create 3 separate journey maps?
And if yes, is there possibility? That's what I found in the past, that I like to create a separate journey map per persona. And he says, if the answer is yes, is there a possibility that these personas might share similar journeys, potentially leading to redundant work and creating multiple journey maps? When I work on an additional journey, like if I start with this persona, then move to the other ones, at some points, yeah, there might be some sections where there is basically a lot of overlap where it becomes copy and paste, or I don't even include it and say, hey, you know what, you could just look back to this persona here. Like their experience with work-life balance is pretty much the same, maybe something like that. But even then, there's definitely, I find a lot more when it comes to there can be quite a bit of differences. Like once you dig in more into the pain points, like for example, one client I had, there was a lot of issues with workload and work-life balance, but for each persona, it was very different of the cause of it. One was due to poor management. Another one was more of, management on high is giving us a lot of work without ever checking in with us if this is something that's possible to do in our current timeline. But so
Sorry.
there is, like I said, there is going to be a lot of overlaps, and like Yulia said, that there are views, so you could fill in those blank spaces. But I found, yeah, I make like a separate journey map per persona.
Awesome, thank you. I was thinking that it might be worth creating one map for like for all three personas and using views, but well,
Yeah, you could do that too. Yeah, but
if this comes in
that's more like the
handy.
finalized. Yeah, but
Okay, and the last question for today is from Justin. What do you consider key points for journey maps for service versus product?
what do you consider key points for journey maps for service? I'm not sure I fully understand the question. What are key points for journey maps for services? Oh, as opposed to like, is that kind of, does it sound like it's like a customer journey map versus employee journey map? For
No,
service versus product.
Justin, can you
Yeah, if you could
specify it in
confirm,
the chat?
if you're still around there.
I suggest giving a minute for Justin
Yeah,
to give us some context.
yeah, I'll scroll through chat as well here. I'm just seeing.
Well, I suppose that maybe it means like you have a product for customers or you provide a service for customers.
Yeah, so that kind of gets more into because I mean, whenever I've done, I guess for employee journey maps, it's all, I guess it'd be more on the service side of things. So it's just create a map for a product versus a service. Oh, okay. So yeah, like a okay. Yeah, because I mean, when I see, I guess more when it comes for products, that's more on the customer journey map side, like that. And that's something I did back back in the day when I was still before I went and did my own thing. Yeah, with products, that's not really my expertise anymore. Like I said, it's more as I move to journey mapping, that's more about it as a service. So when it comes more to products, it's much more about, I'd say touch points are much bigger point, not that they aren't in employee journey maps, but there's more of that touch point process. There's kind of that discovery of how did that customer come across your product. And the means of collecting information are quite a bit different. But yeah, at the end, the journeys are, and as Alex says, that a lot of the things are still the same. Like you're still trying to find the pain points. Just kind of getting that information might be a little more, it's different than as opposed to within your organization. I find when you're working with customers, like as a product, that they tend to be more blunt about their expectations. I can find more with as a service for employees, they might be a little more hesitant to share information because it's like, oh, I don't want to speak too ill of my organization. And they might be like fear of blowback. Hopefully, hopefully that answers it. But like I said, I haven't done anything as far as like with products for a long time as opposed to services, especially when it comes to employee journey mapping.